Kia ora te whānau. It's very, very lovely for me to be here with you and to recognise that the continual weaving that has been going on for since, well, if we take it from 1996, then Te Whāriki has a 20th birthday next year, and the year after that would be the 21st. So I think someone has to bake a very big cake for Te Whāriki in 2017. And we're really delighted that the advisory group that led by Joss was given the task of looking at implementing Te Whāriki, because it was always possible with the developments, I think, in the school curriculum, in the school assessment arena, that it was possible that a new curriculum would be mooted. And so certainly Helen and I and Tilly and Tamati as well were delighted, as were many of you, and particularly all of you many of you in this room were involved in those early groups that developed, that were part of the consultation groups. And I've still got my draft, what was the early copy of Te Whāriki that went out. Who's still got a copy of that early one? Yes. It's got all the references in it. The ministry said, "Oh, you don't want references in there," but they're in there, and also the names of all the consultation groups. And I think that's absolutely part of the history of Te Whāriki, and it's very important. As you know, in Australia, the early years learning framework is very, very similar to Te Whāriki, and they didn't have the opportunity to have that kind of consultation of groups across the country. They were, of course, a much bigger country, but they came up with that belonging, being and becoming as the title of their curriculum. So they're very interested in the developments over the last 20 years that we have had. And I know Wendy Lee is at the moment in Perth working with Lady Gowrie Centres in the north, in Australia, working with them on developing their learning stories. So we're very delighted that we're nearly 21 years, and that the advisory group is asking us to look at implementation. So these discussions, NZEI, as Helen has said, to be continuing these discussions is very, very timely. As a researcher, there are two aspects perhaps that I've often been reminded of, and that I think that I've based most of the research that I have done since Te Whāriki on working with teachers and those early days of Centres of Innovation. Anyone here from Centres of Innovation work? Yes? Excellent. Some of you are here from those early days. Many of them were in Auckland, and certainly I've worked on two of those in Auckland. They've been a great opportunity for developments of Te Whāriki. And when Helen and I spoke to the advisory group, one of the interests that we expressed in informal ways was that Centres of Innovation would be another part of the ongoing weaving, and we don't know what the recommendations are. So the emphasis on mana, the first thing that I think my research and research with many of you has been centred on is on mana. And I know during the development of Te Whāriki in those early years, Tamati spent a lot of time, didn't he, talking to us about exactly what mana meant. And the aspirations for children in Te Whāriki on page 9, for children to grow up as, so that the mana of a learning, across a learning journey, to grow up as competent and confident learners and communicators, healthy in mind, body and spirit, secure in their sense of belonging and in the knowledge that they make a valuable contribution to society. This journey begins at birth. One of the developments since Te Whāriki, of course, has been Te Whatu Pōkeka, the assessment work from the Māori community, and the notion of the baby moulding the pōkeka, the baby beginning to construct their own curriculum, is a fabulous metaphor for that kind of mana for young children. So that aspect of empowerment has been a very important aspect of Te Whāriki. It's been important for the research that we've done. It's been important for you as teachers, and it's been important for NZEI. The second is the notion of the emphasis on learning as situated in learner-friendly and whānau-friendly environments, and the early childhood centre situated in policy-friendly environments as well. The Bronfenbrenner page, page 19. And I know in many countries that I've talked about Te Whāriki, they are amazed that we have had a philosophical statement about learning inside the curriculum development, curriculum document. This has been, I think, it's one of the very few documents that did that, and it was certainly a first for Aotearoa in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So that therefore, what that is saying is the critical role of responsive and reciprocal relationships with people, places, and things. And it's that aspect of Te Whāriki that has also led my interest in research. And it's also led to the notion of learning stories. And I'm hoping that we can talk about the notion that Joss said, that have learning stories replaced Te Whāriki. I think it's certainly is the work that I've done with many of you, and the work that we've done in other centres. There is a weaving between Te Whāriki and learning stories, and that assessment and curriculum have worked hand in hand. And the emphasis on learning as situated is one of the major reasons why we developed learning stories, and why learning stories has captured, I think, the hearts of so many teachers and the practice of so many teachers as well. A narrative approach includes these relationships between people, places and things, and a portfolio describes the strengthening of the learning in relation to those people, places and things. We're looking at children recognising, relishing and reconstructing opportunities to learn, just as the metaphor of pōkeka illustrates. However, many aspects of people and places and things have changed in the 20 years, and this is why it is a good time to look at the implementation of Te Whāriki, and a very good time to have these discussions tonight. First of all, the notion of preparation for school is changing. And in many ways, the links between early childhood and school have been changed radically towards Te Whāriki. When we first wrote Te Whāriki, you look at the back of the current Te Whāriki, the description of school curriculum is very much about the learning areas. The school curriculum has changed, and I get teased by the fact that by people suggesting that page 42 is engraved on my brain, and that's the diagram that takes the long-term view of the child growing up as a competent and confident learner and communicator across from early childhood into school and then into tertiary as well. And that diagram of the strands of Te Whāriki paralleling with the key competencies has gone into the front of many of you who are developing transition to school portfolios, and this has been informing families and been enormously helpful in carving our own position in terms of preparation for school, or in terms of the link with school. And Peter Moss, and who introduced by Helen, Peter Moss has written a book on the relationship between early childhood, edited a book on the relationship between early childhood and compulsory schooling. And he invited me to contribute a chapter to that. And I talked about the possibility of, and I think in many ways it's being done by many of you, to establish a borderland between early childhood and school, a conceptual borderland, which I think the New Zealand school curriculum has done, but also relationships with school and early childhood centres, and many of you are doing that very successfully. And more recently, as Helen has alluded to, literacy and numeracy defined in the literacy progressions and defined in the numeracy progressions, not necessarily defined in terms of, for literacy, in terms of children loving stories and having a sense of narrative, is now emphasised and assessed in quite early school, of course, with teacher judgments, overall teacher judgments. So the kind of filtering down for us, in many of you will have recognised that and felt the pressures from families and from the school to prepare children for those. So we have two clashing developments, and I think we can take charge of those clashing and establish a really rich and happy and fruitful and good learning place between school and early childhood. The second thing that I think has also changed, there's probably a lot has changed in 20 years. Helen and I have got a lot older, is that it's a new digital environment, and new digital opportunities, but also a new digital outreach. And I think that's another thing that might well be part of your discussions. Many young children are now very familiar with tablets, computers, and mobile phones. I have a granddaughter who, when she was 4, would pick up a book and go like this to it, you know. And I think I introduced her to that book which says, "It's a book." Some of you know that. No, you can't email it. It's a book. But so this is 2015. And the learning story books, the kind of rapid international translation of books across the world. Learning story books have been translated into Mandarin, Korean, Italian, Japanese and Danish. Singapore's just published a book on their teachers, with examples of their teachers' learning stories. So the world is come closer to what we are doing, and I think this is a very exciting thing, but it's also something that we have to be prepared for, and it'll shift our lens to a certain extent. A number of companies now are marketing learning stories online, as many of you know, and these provide online information to those families who have access. We need to watch that space as well, and I think we need to return to Te Whāriki all the time. We need to return to the learning story books and the vision of assessment for learning in those books, and Kei Tuo Te Pai for the philosophy and assessment for learning purpose of learning stories. I wish you well for your discussions. I'm very delighted to be part of them, and we look forward to another 20 years of Te Whāriki.